Astros podcast, your home for all things Astros. With your hosts, sports writer Jeff Balke and Astros broadcaster and former third baseman Jeff Blum. Now, here's Balke and Blummer.
What's up, H-Town? Welcome to episode 17 of the Believe in Astros podcast on the Believe Podcasting Network. I am Jeff Balke, and my partner across the way, Jeff Blum. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, all the usual places. Of course, also on YouTube. Be sure and like and subscribe. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button to keep up with us. And, of course, follow us on Twitter at Believe in Astros, BLEAV. And you can find me at Jeff Balke, JEFFBALK, and Blummer at Blummer27. Send us your comments, questions. Let us have it. We're getting ready to go into the postseason. There's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about, including today. And with that, Blummer, how's it going? You're off the road, finally. Your long road sentence is over for the season.
Yeah, it was nice to get back out on the road, obviously, and be around the ball club and have that kind of fun. But at the same time, once you get through that entire season and you've got the 81 road games, you're more than happy to get back home. And for obvious reasons, Houston is a great place to be, and this time of year is absolutely beautiful outside.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah, I'm happy to be out of the rain delays of Baltimore and, that stagnant atmosphere of Tampa Bay inside that dome. So very happy to be home, yes.
We should mention the fact that right now Florida is going through a massive tragedy with Hurricane Ian about to come on shore on the cusp of a Category 5, a little bit south of Tampa Bay. They won't get the worst of it, but you and I were talking beforehand that we have an interesting way of an interesting connection to this, because after Hurricane Harvey, we ended up playing games at Tropicana Field. I guess this is kind of our chance to help them in their circumstance, and I understand they've moved a bunch of their people here. They obviously the series coming up over the weekend. What have you heard about that?
Well, I heard that they did a good job of getting all the families out of there, number one. I think that's great on the organization's part to be able to do that. But at the same time, I think they've done a good job of getting as many personnel within the Tampa Bay organization basically on the team flight and get them out of there and secure their properties. And, like you said, this is going to be a catastrophic event. And fortunately, they got ahead of it a little bit and they're able to move some of the personnel out of there. I know that, they travel with their broadcast crew. So, of course, they're going to have Dwayne Stats, Brian Anderson, and their radio crew with them. But I've also heard that they're traveling their pre- and post crew, which is something that was unique to our situation when we had to go to Tampa. We weren't able to travel our pre and post, so Julia and I were actually carried pre and post in Tampa Bay. But they accommodated for us, and I know that Minute Maid Park is going to accommodate them also. So good move by the Astros, and I'm sure that once we understand what's actually happening after this storm passes, I'm sure that the Astros Foundation is going to reach out and much like Major League Baseball, try and help these teams out. Yeah,
well, I mean, look, we're all on the Gulf Coast. We're all subject to the same laws of nature, and that includes hurricanes. Fortunately for us, our hurricane season is essentially over for Texas. We've got beautiful weather here, so at least we could offer that. It's not a ton of comfort, but it's something. Let's talk, just before we get too deep into it, I just kept thinking, look, the fastest they could gas up the plane and get people out of Baltimore, the better. That was one of the weirdest series. I mean, first, you have two games where the Astros can't score a run, and then they explode for 11 runs in a back and forth that I'm not sure we've seen really the likes of maybe since that 2017 Dodgers World Series game.
Yeah.
And then they end up, winning in extra innings, and they're fine. I mean, what a series. That was one of the craziest series I've ever seen. What about you? What did you think?
No, it was absolutely incredible, and we always say it in the game. You hang around this game long enough, you're going to see something you've never seen before.
Yeah.
And I've never played in a series like this. I've never seen a series like this until we actually had a chance to call it, because Bradish and Kramer it sounds like a law firm that went out there and just completely wiped out the Astros offense.
Right.
And the first two games, the first time they've been back-to-back shutout, since last season. And
right.
Then they show up on the third game of the series, and all of a sudden, like you said, we always look at Fangraphs or Baseball Savant, and they have the win probability going as the game goes.
It's a super roller coaster.
It was unbelievable. I mean, if that actually was a roller coaster, I don't think anybody would ride on it because out of fear.
Right.
So it was kind of nice that they ended up on top. But then you have the rain delay, you have the Rougned Odor admiring a base hit kind of thing that led to, a tie ball game, extra innings, and all 5 hours later we eventually got on that plane. Yeah.
I mean, I never want to see Rougned Odor again. Like that guy is that guy is a thorn. He is. I mean, a friend of mine and I were talking about the other day. Like there are just certain guys that just have the number of your team. And Odor just appears to be one of those guys. Although the funniest moment of Odor is I said something on Twitter about never wanting to see Odor again. And my wife, who didn't know who he was, just said, what odor are you talking about?
You can't see an odor.
Exactly. And I was like, all right, then let me explain this.
No, this is that odor that lingers.
This is the one that really sticks with you. You don't want to deal with this. So the Astros, they got 7 games left. They need 5-2 to win 107, 6-1 to beat that, 6-1 or better to beat that. At this point, I don't know if it's likely they reach a 107, but regardless of the fact, it's going to be one of the best records in the history of the ball club, already over 100 wins. But how do you balance out that desire with keeping guys healthy? I mean, we saw last night with Jordan twisting that ankle at home plate, and I felt like my buddy Frank texted me and was like, he said, I almost passed out when Jordan rolled his ankle.
Yeah, how many people ran to the defibrillator after that?
Exactly. I know.
Like, wait, no, not Jordan.
It's like, not Jordan. So how do you balance? I mean, obviously the Astros, at this point, they've got their magic numbers 1 to clinch the AL. I think it's pretty clear that's going to happen, maybe tonight. But how do you balance that health versus wanting to play well going into the postseason? You don't want to necessarily go into the postseason on a losing streak, but also you don't want to go into the postseason without your best player. So what do you do about that?
You know what? It's kind of interesting because you do have 5 days between the end of the season and that first game of the American League Division Series, and that's where I think the issue is created because you as a manager and as a player, you're like, man, I'll just go, blow it out for the last, 6-7 games of the season and know that I've got 5 days off. So why not go do that and put up my numbers? Go after that 107, 108 wins and set the franchise records. That's where the enticement is there. But at the same time, you have to be a little measured about it because you have freak things that happen in baseball. It's just crazy that Jordan had a base hit the other way. But how often do we hear it in the NFL? A non-contact injury. Those are the ones that freak you out because there's no excuse for it. It's just a mishap. And you saw that ankle twist and you're going, oh, dear God. And he goes limping to first. He walks it off and you're like, oh, okay. Has the second at bat. And then all of a sudden he disappears and that just sets everybody off again. You're like, oh, my gosh, what happened? But I think that you do have to measure it a little bit. You want these guys to get their numbers. But at the same time, you have to talk to the players, say, be smart about how you play. I know you want to go hard, but let's temper that idea a little bit. Maybe not go 150 miles an hour down first base or diving head first into everything. Let's be a little measured on how we go out there. But then as a coaching staff, too, you've got to be a little more aware and cognizant of how do I protect these guys and make sure that they are healthy going into that postseason.
Yeah, and also running down the first baseline is a good one. Nobody wants to see that guy grab the back of his hamstring, right? I mean, it feels like for a number of years, Houston was like the hamstring injury capital of the world. Like every team, like the Texans had guys with hamstring problems, the Astros had guys, the Rockets had guys, so that you don't, the biggest thing to me with these injuries is you don't want a catastrophic injury. Nobody wants any of that. But you also don't want any injuries that have the potential to linger. Hamstrings, high ankle sprains, stuff like that. Those are the kind of things that they'll stick with you. This back stiffness, or should I say discomfort? That's depending on everything is discomfort. Look, watching Jordan twist his ankle was discomfort, right? And,
yeah, I was going to say, is there fan discomfort we can talk about? Just the emotional discomfort that was?
I mean, it was, and the funny thing is, I didn't see it when it happened. I was actually sitting outside in this weather, and I was running it on the DVR so that I could run back and skip commercials. No offense, AT&T Southwest. But I was, so I just started getting text messages like immediately, like Jordan rolled his ankle. I'm like, oh God. Like, and then my first thought is, of course, being like most fans, a little bit funny about a little bit superstitious. I immediately thought, well, I can't eat outside ever again. Like, that's the end of that. I will never be able to sit outside and eat ever again in the history of time, because that means that every time exactly, it's so ridiculous. But I do think that the main thing for the Astros has got to be health at this point, above all else. Obviously, there are guys who want to get there. I mean, Kyle Tucker's on the verge of a 30-30 year. Yeah. I mean, he's what is it, 5 steals away, I think, from getting to 30
he's 5
steals.
steals now.
And he's just 1 home run from 30. You feel like he's probably going to get that, but steals, like, all I can tell him is, can he put his entire body in one of those oven mitts? Like, I mean, you have the oven mitt to protect your hand. Can you just put on like a neoprene padded suit if he's going to steal? Because don't hurt yourself, man.
Dude, I'm like, whatever it takes. I'm with you on that. Protect these guys a little bit. But that's the other thing that we didn't talk about, knowing that these guys are approaching, career numbers.
Yeah.
Kyle Tucker is a guy who wants a big contract, who desperately needs a big contract, because I feel he's worthy of it.
Yeah.
And now he's on the precipice of getting to that 30-30 plateau. Yeah. And, that's a big deal. He's going to end up being a 30, 100-plus RBI type guy who has the potential to be a Gold Glove outfielder on top of it. And, oh, by the way, he'll steal you 20 bags a year and do it at a high rate, too. He's not a guy that goes out there and gets caught very often.
No.
So you want those guys to get it. Altuve hitting 2 home runs. Now he's at 28. He's almost a 30 home run guy. It's
I know.
And he's going to hit 300 again for the first time in a long time, too. So, these guys are approaching. I think Yuli's a couple doubles away from 40. Alex Bregman's a couple doubles away from 40. These guys are putting up career numbers. Yeah. But you do have to say, go get them. But, at the same time, we're going to be giving you days off here and there. And if we have blowouts again, we may sneak you out of the lineup and just kind of cut down on the ABs and limit the exposure. Because like you said, if you do get that tight hamstring, going into October, you're playing in some cold, wet, ugly weather outdoors. You don't want to be trying to protect that and play for a championship. That's tough.
No, that's a really good point. The cold weather, especially this year, because everything's been pushed back. I mean, Game 7 this year is potentially in November of the World Series. We're talking November 3rd for the end of the World Series. I mean, Thanksgiving is 3 weeks from that, for God's sake. I mean, that's insane. So, yeah, there are a lot of guys that are going to have to be cautious about that. But the record numbers are really a big deal. Look, Kyle Tucker, he goes under the radar a lot because he is an understated guy, and because he is, but that's a guy that absolutely is in the market for a big contract. And Jose Altuve, I don't know what else can we say about this guy. He just keeps producing, like, year after year after year. It doesn't matter. Like, and obviously he's getting older, so there are certain things, his steal numbers are down, things like that. But I mean, good Lord, his like numbers in terms of just average home runs. And this guy, everybody's like, oh, he's off to a slow start. It must be, he must be winding down. It's like
this dude could get 10 hits in 2 days, man.
And never mind the fact that his defense is still great at second base. He still plays a great second base. You just can't say anything about him other than the fact that he's one of the greatest Astros of all time.
No, he's
already cemented
himself
that.
into. Yeah, no, it might be Biggio. I love Lance Berkman and some of these guys, but as far as the offensive side, it may go. Depending on how you look at it, with home runs, Baggy obviously, but the hits, Bish, and then it's going to be Jose Altuve. But the way he's playing, he may vault himself, because he's a combination. He's a little bit of a hybrid of both now.
He is,
where he's a high average, high slug guy, and I think he might have 18 stolen bases if I'm not.
Does he have that many?
I think so. So he might actually be a 2020 guy by the end of it, too. And the Astros could have 2 2020 guys between Tucker and Altuve. And we just saw Jeremy Pena put up his 20th home run. These
Right.
guys are going and getting it, and this offense is getting hot at the right time, which I love.
It sure is. Which is exactly, by the way, what Blumstradamus said, but a few weeks ago. It's my new nickname for you from now on, because you seem to be dead on accurate with these things. So let's talk first. Let's hit a little bit. I wanted to really talk a little bit about what the rosters are going to shape up like as we get into the playoffs. We're getting close to that time, about a week away. Teams can carry 26 players. Are they allowed? This is a question somebody asked me the other day, and I didn't honestly know the answer. I tried to look it up. They're allowed to keep guys with them, like in the dugout and stuff like that, but they're just inactive, correct?
I believe it's similar to the COVID year, and I've heard we actually had James Click on, I believe, Saturday in Baltimore, and he kind of mentioned to the fact that when you do, and this makes sense too, just because of the logistics of a postseason, it's a taxi squad.
Right.
That term really popped up in that COVID year where you travel
did.
with a taxi squad to protect in case infection. But now you have the taxi squad that can travel with you, work out, stay in shape, because if there's an injury, you pull a guy off the taxi squad, but then if you move on to the championship series, you adjust your roster, and those guys are fresh and ready, and they've been in that environment, and you don't have to pluck them from West Palm Beach where they may be working out. So, yes, there's a taxi squad, but they're also going to reduce that roster to 26 as opposed to the 28 that we're playing with here in September.
Right. So by my mind, that means I know it's 13 pitchers, 13 position players. So I think it's a pretty easy one when it comes to the play non-pitching staff. I mean, the starters, which is Yuli and Jose Altuve, Jeremy Pena, Alex Bregman, Martin Maldonado, and in the outfield, Kyle Tucker, Chas McCormick, and I think Yordan Alvarez and Aledmus Diaz will probably have split time at left field, DH. Then your bench is Christian Vasquez, Mauricio Dubon, Trey Mancini, and I assume at this point David Hensley has got to be your last guy on the bench, right?
Yeah, that's the interesting part. Is it going to be a guy like David Hensley? Because this guy is surging right now. We just saw him hit his first big league home run. While guys are going for milestone numbers, there's a guy trying to just get numbers, but also be on a playoff roster. That could be a really good story in David Hensley. And what's unique about him is he's a shortstop. And I've always been a big believer that athletes play shortstop, so you can move him to second base, third base. I'm sure you could throw him at first base and give him a glove if you had to. I'm talking desperation. I'm not talking necessity. I'm talking complete desperation where a couple of guys fall out with injury or whatever. You could put him in left field. You can put him in right field. But he puts together such a good at-bat that I think he does need some consideration, possibly to be on that playoff roster if it's not a pinch hit situation or a double switch, or come in against a matchup that really fits him. But he showed some pop yesterday. But the at bats for me is what's kind of maybe warranting him making an appearance on that roster.
Well, I think the other thing too is, like you said, versatility is a hugely important part of doing. You get
Diaz
down
and
into
Dubon are huge.
Right, Diaz, Dubon. And you look at Hensley; those three guys can play almost anywhere on the field.
Yeah.
And you've got Mancini, who can play first base and left field as well.
And he's your threat off the bench. A power threat. You need that guy. They don't have the one thing they are lacking is that left-handed power bat.
That's true.
But if you have a guy that you can bring in off the bench that that a pitcher says, if I make a mistake, it's going to get hammered 400 feet.
Right.
That's what I mean by a threat guy. And he is definitely that threat guy.
Absolutely. And the good thing, too, is Vasquez is a very good hitter and a unique kind of hitter in that he goes the opposite way a lot. So he's a guy that
too.
Very smart, and he's a really good defensive catcher. So if you do bring him in to pinch hit, he can take over, and you're not worried about any drop-off. Like, you're not worried about, this guy's mainly a hitter. We don't really want him behind the plate catching anybody. I felt like in some ways, even though he had a good arm, you did feel that way earlier in the season with Jason Castro. He's a guy that, could give you some at-bats, but wasn't exactly the guy that you wanted managing your pitchers. But both Vasquez and Maldonado obviously can manage guys. I think it's going to be really that 13th spot is going to be the interesting one, who they're going to choose for that. It feels like David Hensley right now, but, I mean, we don't know now. That could change.
Yeah, remember in years past, they also used to have that speed guy. It was a Jose
Right,
Siri.
like Miles Straw or Jose Siri.
Derek Fisher.
Derek Fisher,
They
right.
had that burner that they could pinch run and fly around the bases. That's the only thing. I don't know who that guy is or if they have somebody waiting in the wings maybe, but that might, is it Mauricio Dubon? I don't know.
Right.
That's
pretty
the
quick.
interesting thing.
That is a really good point. I had not thought about the speed guy, but look, that made a huge difference. Derek Fisher it was a big deal.
A couple of times, yeah.
A couple of times having that speed on the base path. So, yeah, that's definitely a good point. Well, let's talk a little bit about the pitching rotation because this is really where it gets much more interesting. With 13 pitchers, the starters, I think they're pretty much set. If you go with 4, it's going to be Justin Verlander, Framber Valdez, Christian Javier, and Lance McCullers Jr., in whatever order you place those last 2 guys.
I completely agree.
I think those 4 have to be your starters. They're the obvious ones. You may not even start a guy in the 4th game if you get to that. You may put 2 starters out there because the long relief / piggyback guys are Jose Urquidy and Luis Garcia. It's kind of unbelievable.
Like you said it last podcast, it's an embarrassment of riches when
It
you sit
is.
in this room and they're going to have to make tough decisions, but could you imagine being James Click and Josh Miller, the pitching coach for the Astros, and kind of looking at each other going, we have Urquidy and Garcia waiting over here.
Right.
We don't even need them in our rotation in the playoffs.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
No, and I think those 2 guys, I do think Garcia makes it especially now that he's been warming up to throw out of the bullpen. They've obviously given him an opportunity there. He's got to make the playoff roster for that reason alone, right?
Well, and I think what we saw yesterday, he had a great start. But if I'm looking at Luis Garcia in that bullpen role, and obviously he's young, he's extremely good. But I also think like what you just said there about him being pliable enough to go out in that bullpen and say, yes,
Right.
I will do whatever's best for this organization and team to help us win. And obviously I want to be in the playoffs. So going to the bullpen is a logical move for him. But I love the fact in that start that we saw last night, that dude was touching 97. And if I give Luis Garcia 1 inning or 2 innings, he'll be able to maintain 97.
Yeah.
And then that makes that cutter that much nastier. That could be a pretty nasty secret weapon out of that bullpen.
Yeah. I think, look, if they make it to the World Series too, he can just confuse them with his thing on the mound where he's like doing his rock and like just get
he
them
goes from the cha-cha-cha to the cha-cha, and you're like, oh, shoot, here it comes.
Just get him, just use him to like sort of mesmerize them, like, it's like before you know it, they don't even know what they're doing. But I do think the interesting thing about him too is the potential, not maybe in the ALDS, but if you get to the ALCS, the potential for him,
Yes.
starting a game and pitching 3-4 innings and then piggybacking him, then I think it's obvious that he's a good guy to have in there. And same thing with Jose Urquidy. These are 2 guys you can they're like half starters.
Well, isn't that the worry of most teams that are going to be playing in those championship series and World Series is the fact that the Astros have that kind of depth. And
Right.
the ALDS, for those that are listening, it's a 5-game series, best 3 out of 5. And with the pitching staff that the Astros have, it may be Verlander, McCullers, Framber Valdez, let's move on to the championship series.
Right.
But the way that the scheduling is set up is that you have that day off early in the first 2 games, but then you go 3, 4, 5. I think it's 4, 5, 6, 7 in consecutive order.
Right.
That's where the Astros' depth might actually overwhelm the opposing team because they don't have that kind of depth. And if they don't, you're going to see a bullpen game, or you're going to see a short start and then the bullpen get abused, and that'll set up beautifully for the next game because the Astros will continue to throw guys out there for 5 and 6 innings, and they'll be fresh, rested, and their bullpen will be used appropriately.
Well, and I think and we'll get to the bullpen names here in a second, but I think another thing that a really good point you bring up here too is that they're going to be able to throw guys out there maybe in games 5 and 6 who've not pitched yet, which is a completely different deal because obviously the one thing they talk about in baseball is a 3rd time through a rotation, right? So if you want to try to prevent that from happening, the Astros pitching depth will certainly allow them to do that so that they have, relievers that are going out there for an inning or a couple innings here and there. By the time they get to the end of the series, this might be the first time a guy's seeing, a Ryan Stanek or a Brian Abreu or something like that.
Well, you talk about, the third time through the orders where everybody goes, oh, that's just the third time for a hitter to recognize a pitcher and make adjustments. But if you get into that championship series and you have a Luis Garcia go 2 times through the order, which is maybe 5 innings, and then you have Urquidy go the 3rd time through the order, that gets you into the 6th and 7th innings, and then all of a sudden it's closeout from there. That's where I think the benefit of having an Urquidy or Garcia, Hunter Brown, some guys that have some length on them that can cover that 3rd time through the order.
Right.
That's what could be interesting if Dusty and Josh Miller decide to use it that way.
Right. So let's talk. So that would leave us with those 4 starters plus the 2 piggyback long reliever guys. That leaves us with 7 relief spots. So it's obvious Ryan Presley, Ryan Stanek, Brian Abreu, Rafael Montero are pretty much the obvious guys. I think Hector Neris is going to definitely be an obvious guy 5th. Then you've got Phil Maton, Will Smith, and then Hunter Brown. And that's going to be the big one. Now, my feeling is that they're going to go with Maton and Smith. I think they're going to go with Smith simply because they don't have any lefties. They don't have anybody that throws left out, other than Framber Valdez, right? So you almost feel like that because Dusty is an old school traditionalist kind of guy, he likes to go lefty on lefty sometimes.
This is a big point. Yep.
And I also think there's a loyalty factor. A guy like Maton has been like, I would love to see Hunter Brown in the postseason. I think most fans would love to see Hunter Brown in the postseason. But you kind of wonder, are they going to do that with a rookie? Are they going to put him in high leverage situations, put him under that pressure? Jeremy Pena talked about how last year he was on the taxi squad and got to be around the guys in the postseason but didn't actually play, and what a huge factor that was for him. I wonder if they're not going to treat Hunter Brown with that, despite the fact that the guy still, his stuff is electric. He's ridiculous. I don't know. What's your take on all that?
Well, that's what's the beauty of having a podcast like this and being able to speculate a little bit, is that you can use that gut and have some fun with it and talk it out. So your gut is put Hunter Brown in there because he throws 97, 98, and we saw a slider last night at 94 that was absolutely ludicrous.
That slider was insane. That was insane.
Yeah, Zach Davies' fastball, the starter for the Arizona Diamondbacks, averaging 89, and Hunter Brown throwing a slider at 94 gives you an idea how good he is. But, so that stuff plays, and like you said, it's unproven at the playoff level. It's proven in the regular season. He's going to have a successful career because of the stuff he has. Then you look at Will Smith, and like you said about Dusty being old school, he understands. He watched Will Smith come out of that Braves bullpen and shut them down consistently in the postseason. So that sticks in Dusty's mind and says, well, we've got that guy now. And he's left-handed. So he will match up nicely against some of those guys. And I believe since he's become an Astro, he has around a 2.6, 2.7 ERA.
Yeah, he's been
if
good.
You want to narrow it down to that. And then you add on to the postseason. So that gives him some hope. Phil Maton, maybe not having the best season like we saw last year. He's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride too, but what he did in the postseason, especially in the World Series, is going to carry some weight to it because he's pitched under those circumstances. So that's where it gets kind of interesting.
I just, it would be so much fun to see Hunter Brown in there. I think it would be, fun to see him, but. Like we're talking about our guts here. My gut tells me that the Astros don't do that just simply because they want to make. Well, let's put it this way: if there's any series they're going to do it in, it's going to be the ALDS because we've got the lowest chance of failure or anything like that. It's the lowest pressure, and also look, I don't think it's going to happen to Hunter Brown, but there is a chance you put him in there, he implodes, and it impacts him. It lingers. I don't think it'll happen to him. He does the stuff he has, like you said, is so good. But all these things are playing. Let's just put it this way. I don't want to be the guy that makes that decision. You're not going to make anybody happy no matter what you choose. No matter what happens, it's going to be weird for somebody.
No, it is going to be weird for somebody, but there's a couple of things. Number one, gut feeling. I want to see Hunter Brown pitch with some adrenaline because who knows the velocity he'll get to.
Right.
He may be pumping 100 consistently because that heart rate's up and he's excited.
Hundo.
Hundo. And number two, I'm with you. No matter who they put on that roster, and I said it last night during our broadcast, if no matter if it's a Division Series, Championship, World Series, the 13 pitchers that the Astros are going to put on that roster are going to be pretty damn good, and I'm going to be comfortable with it.
Yeah, and honestly, I saw somebody the other day on the MLB Network talking about how the Astros have really the best pitching staff in baseball, and he said it's not really even close. There are guys that have great starting lineups. There are some really deep bullpens that exist out there. But in terms of putting it all together, in terms of starters, relievers, and frankly, I'd be willing to argue that it's the best pitching staff the Astros have ever had. I cannot recall a time.
It's almost there. You're right.
It's very close. I cannot recall a time when they had this level of depth and quality from the A starter all the way to the last guy on the bench, relief out of the pen.
Yeah, because what was it, 2018? It was Verlander, Cole, Morton, McCullers.
Yeah.
You had staffs like that, but I think what you're trying to get to is all the way through the rotation and then all the way through the bullpen is where you're talking about. That's what's amazing is that you've married the great rotation with the great bullpen.
Yeah.
And it's just been a match made in heaven. And they're on the edge of becoming not just the best pitching team in all of baseball, which we already recognize, but putting them up against those mid-'80s pitching staffs for the Houston Astros that we all talk about. The Nolan Ryans and the Bob Neppers. Mike Scott. Phil
Niekro.
And the way they were able to go out there and close games out, they were very good pitching staffs, and they were pitching in the Astrodome. I don't want to discount pitching there, but they had a very pitcher-friendly environment. But the Astros are so good at their pitching that they've turned Minute Maid Park into a great pitcher's ballpark.
That really is saying something, isn't it? It's funny. My favorite Jim Deshaies of anything, great color commentator, and when he finished and playing baseball. But I loved one of the best phrases was when Milo was still calling games. Rest in peace, Milo Hamilton, one of the voices of my youth. When Milo was still calling games, Deshaies would say something, and he almost always responded back, "That's right, Jimmy D." Every time. That's right, Jimmy D. Every time, man. That's right, every time. That's right, Jimmy D. I think the Astros pitching is really what's going to carry them. I really think their pitching and their defense, I should say. And by the way, these two things go hand in hand. They have pitchers out there who are willing to throw in the strike zone because they know they've got guys behind them who are going to back them up. Jeremy Pena with yet another great play last night. The guy to me, defensively, they really haven't lost anything from Carlos Correa. Obviously, we've seen an offensive drop-off by a little, but certainly not anything that's terrible for them. But, man, as far as defense goes, forget it. It's one of the just so good.
No, he's leading all Major League shortstop in that DRS, the defensive runs saved. I think it was at 18, but he does such a good job. And he did make an error last night, but at the same time, I love the fact that he's not the guy that makes the error and just kind of pouts, hangs his head, and says, "Oh my gosh, I hope they don't hit me another one." He's the other guy. He's the guy that spikes his glove, goes over to shortstop, and yells at the pitcher, "Get me another one." And you saw it the other day, like you're talking about. He lays out to his right, makes a great play, and almost turns a miraculous double play.
Almost, came so close. And Bregman, I feel like he and Bregman are cut from the same cloth with that. Yeah. You see when Bregman messes up, his eyes get huge. He looks like he's ready to murder somebody out there, and like he's waiting for another baseball. Like it's just those. I honestly, I've always found that to be a really fascinating attitude, and it's something that not every baseball player has. It's not any athlete has that ability to like turn your anger at yourself, your frustration, and all that other stuff into the motivation to be better the next time around. That's something I feel like the Astros have in spades. They really do have a lot of guys who have that sort of like, they don't get mad, they get even. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like.
Oh, yeah. Well, if they didn't have that, internal mechanism that allowed them to turn the page so quick, that Baltimore series would have been a disaster of a 4-game sweep. They got abused for 2 games, and they showed up on Saturday and said, you know what, we're not going to let this happen today, and they continued to fight. That's why it was a roller coaster game that they ended up winning.
Yeah, it does really feel like, and we've talked about this before, that the Astros, when they want to, have the ability just to bear down and just blow people out. I mean, they really, and that's not to say anything that there aren't other good teams out there and stuff like that. There clearly are, and it's going to be a tough playoffs for sure, regardless of who they have to face. But they just have another gear, it seems like, that they're like, they don't really tighten up in the same way that teams tighten up. And some of that, I guess, has got to be attributed to experience. And they've been doing this year after year now for 6 seasons, really, with some of these guys. Before we go, when you're getting ready for a postseason like this, if you're a player, do you do anything really differently? Do you approach it any differently, or are you just like, no, this is just another game, just like a regular season? What is sort of your mindset as you're getting closer to that?
Well, there's a certain excitement level that is there, and you start to, I don't know if it's a checklist or what it is, but you start to forget about the aches and pains of the season, because the second season starts and the adrenaline takes over and some of that pain subsides and the focus becomes a little bit more narrow. And I think that first time in the postseason, you may be a little jittery, high heart rate, breathing a little bit heavier, but the focus starts to narrow a little bit. And I think that these guys have enough experience, like you're talking about, that they know how to do it. They don't panic. And that's probably the one big thing for this Astros team is that I've seen with them, especially going back to 2017 even, they don't panic. For whatever reason, they believe in the guy on their right. They believe in that guy on their left. And they're like, if I don't get it done, I know my boy's going to pick me up and get it done. So that's what creates that no panic. And I love that fact. But these guys are just going to continue to work, continue to maintain, but they're going to maybe focus a little bit more on preparation. And I think that's where they're a little bit different is, you've got the analytic department sending information down. You've got video crews that are giving you the appropriate video to watch. And then it's up to the hitting coaches, the pitching coaches to develop these game plans and really prepare to go out there. Because I feel at this level, no matter if football, basketball, hockey, whatever it is, if you're not prepared for situations, you are going to panic. And the way you eliminate panic is being prepared for all situations and seeing it before it happens. And that's what the Astros do very good is they prepare, and they prepare extremely well, and they adjust in-game extremely well. Those guys are always talking to each other, and that I'm a little jealous of that fact because that's what I miss is some of that competitive knowledge that these guys are sharing. That's where these guys separate themselves. Yeah,
I think you make a good point about being prepared. Emmitt Smith, I always remember, he had a line about somebody was interviewing him and asking why it is that athletes win on Dancing with the Stars. And he said it's because we know how to practice. He said most people, they practice until they get something right. He said we practice until we can't do it wrong. And I think that's the difference.
Great quote.
It's the difference between a professional and an amateur, really, because you have the time to spend to hone that and the ability to not only go through it physically but mentally, hundreds and hundreds of times. That repetition. It's like the 10,000 hours or whatever it is to be an expert.
Gladwell, yeah.
Right, and so you figure. That's got to be that preparation is such a huge part of this. And now with all of the video that they have and all the digital technology, it must be even, you've got to have a pretty good baseball mind to absorb all of that information, hold on to it.
Yeah.
But the fact that they've been going through this now for years it's got to be a big help.
No, the information is a huge help, and these guys know how to, like you said, they've been doing it for so long that they know how to absorb it. And another thing is, too, this as well as studying in high school. What classes did you do good in? The ones you enjoyed. They enjoy studying for baseball.
Yes.
They enjoy playing baseball, so they're going to absorb as much information they can to go out there and succeed.
I can tell you I did not enjoy math, and my grades reflected it.
That makes two of us.
I had no desire to, I actually... All right, I'll share this before we go. When I was in algebra class, I think it was a freshman in high school, I had a teacher, Mrs. Glandorf. If she's still out there, God bless her. I told her that I would never use algebra in my daily life ever. I told her this, and she's like, "How do you know you won't use it?" I said, "Because I will not do it simply to spite you." That's what as I left at the end, because she was so mean. I was like, I will not do it. And listen, I'm not generally a spiteful person, but I have kept that promise. I still have never done algebra in my daily life, and honestly, I'm not real proud of it. But it is something I've got to stick with now. Too old to let it go.
I know. But isn't it crazy that we were not good at math, yet we're covering sports that deal with nothing but numbers?
But
that's what makes me laugh.
It's funny too, because statistics I was always good at. It was always, I didn't want to know I can read and understand the math. I just don't want to have to do it. Like when they're like, show your work. I'm like, there was a great Far Side cartoon years ago that said that on one side had this massive formula of the board, and then on the other side had like a simple answer, and in the middle it just said, and then a miracle occurs. I always feel like that's how I feel about math. It's like, and then a miracle occurs. I don't know what happened. I know the answer is this.
That's pretty funny. I like it.
All right, well, thanks for joining us today, everybody. Blummer, you got any final thoughts before the second game of against Arizona Diamondbacks tonight?
No, tonight's going to be awesome. Zach Gallen, Justin Verlander.
Right.
I mean, get your popcorn, buckle up. It's either going to be an unbelievable pitching matchup, or it's just going to be this explosion of runs. I hope it's an explosion of runs for the Astros, and Verlander just puts his name in stone for that Cy Young.
Man, he is. I feel like he's got it sewn up. But if tonight he comes out, and he wants it. He wants it too. You know that he just wants to come out and bury whoever it is just for that. He's that guy for sure, right? He is absolutely that guy. We
talked about it with Pena and Bregman. Verlander's another one of those guys.
Oh yeah, I would never ever want to cross Verlander when it came to baseball. Like I would assume that if you ever had a problem with Verlander, I would feel like for the rest of my life, the times that I faced him, it was going to be personal. He was just going to, every pitch was just going to be brutal. I would just be like, it's nice to meet you, Mr. Verlander.
Just treat me like a normal hitter. Just don't take life out on me, man.
Just don't ruin me.
Yeah.
All right, Blumber, thanks so much. Please send us your questions. We have loads of stuff coming. The playoffs are coming, so we're really going to be hitting it hard, obviously. Want you to join us. Give us a follow on Twitter. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button. Make sure you tune in. Send this out to all your friends. Tell them what a great couple of dudes we are, and tell them how awesome this podcast is. And, we'll give you our thanks.
You won't be lying.
No, you won't be lying.
It's the truth.
That's absolute truth. All right, Blummer, we'll talk to you next time. Thanks, everybody. Go Astros.